be.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just a minute early, so I'm just going to introduce a little bit. So my name's Keris. I'm a senior communications engagement specialist at the Growth Hub. We've invited Ben here to run this session on behalf of the Growth Hub as an expert in the field. So we'll get going in just under a minute. Proper as people start to join, but thank you for everyone for joining today, and everyone who's watching back on the recording as well. So everyone who's signed up will get the recording, and we'll I can see a few people are starting to join now, so I'll you're controlling there, are you? So do you want to flick through, Ben?
Yeah.
And I'll yeah, so as I say, my name's Keris. If you want to flick through, that's if you want to scan that, you can connect to me on LinkedIn. So yeah, just a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone who's attending the session today, they'll have their cameras off and mics off. You can ask the questions in the Q&A. So there's a Q&A function there, which you can ask questions. We'll get to those at the end. If there's any, we'll try and kind of club those questions together. If there's kind of similar ones that are us, and if there's any ones that are really quite specific, then we can kind of follow those up afterwards. You can tick that anonymous. So if you want to ask questions anonymously, then you can do. But bear in mind, we won't be able to follow those up afterwards with you because we won't know who you are, and the playback will be sent to everybody, so we don't send out slides, but you will get the recording back to watch back again and again, so that will be on the system there, and you'll get an automatic email about that. Okay, next slide. So the Growth Hub is for Cornwall, Niles of Scilly, businesses, to help businesses to grow. So we've been working in Cornwall since 2016. So to access the free business support that's available. So we're the kind of point of contact for free business support. We're part of Cornwall Council now, and we're about to evolve into the next level. A next sort of iteration of what the Growth Hub will be as of a few months' time. So at the moment, you can still, I don't know if you want to click on. Sorry, next slide. And again, yeah, so we're still here, this team is still here, and we can still have conversations with you about your business, what direction you want to go in, and what your business and personal goals are. And there's still national support available that we can point you in the direction of the support that's out there. I think that is that the end of me?
I think so, yeah.
Excellent. And I'll hand over. I'll turn off my camera, so I'll come back on at the end. I'll monitor if there's any obvious questions that I can respond to straight away. I'll do that in the chat, but otherwise we'll get to the Q&A at the end.
Thanks, Keris.
I'll hand over to Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, questions are really welcome. Jot them down. We're going to cover quite a bit today, but each part in not a massive amount of detail. Hopefully enough to open your minds a little bit, and but I'm imagining it will actually raise quite a few questions. Whether we can answer them today or not is another matter, but don't be afraid to ask it. So jot it down, and if we resolve it later in the discussion, that's great. But pop it into the questions, and we'll do our best to tackle as many as we can at the end. So here's a summary of what we're going to cover today. Brand is often thought of or treated purely as a design or marketing exercise. In reality, it's the foundation of the business, and it's a commercial asset that influences the business performance across the board: revenue, margin, trust, long-term growth, all of the cornerstones of a successful and growing business. So this session is about exploring how brand impacts that business performance, and why it should be treated on the same level as finance or operations or sales, anything, all the other cornerstones that you might put at the fore for the growth of the business. It's deliberately not your usual branding or marketing session. It's not to say that it's divorced from that, because it's all part of the same thing. Brand is quite a huge topic. We're covering a holistic overview of the relationship between brand and business from a performance perspective. So there'll be reasons why we might shortcut a few things where we have to refer to crossing over into marketing or communications or anything else. That's deliberate. So let's get on. And I think the first thing to do would be, if I can move the slides, there we go, is to think about what is it we are talking about when we say brand. What is brand? I think it's important to pause here for a second before we dive in, and sort of make sure we're all on the same wavelength. Perhaps even have a think about it yourselves. To you, what do you see as brand? Maybe jot that down. See if that view changes in the next few minutes when we talk about when I talk about what we refer to as brand. And I say we, but here's a leveler. The dictionary definition of brand and branding separately is really clear. Brand is a set of qualities that people connect with a particular product or service or organization. Branding separately are the elements that make the product or service or person easy, recognizable, different from others, and that it hints at some of those qualities, which are the name, the design, symbol, logo, set of qualities. So it's really importantly not just visual. It's not just the logo. Those things do matter, but it's the result of deeper thinking. How a business positions itself, how it behaves, and how consistently it delivers on what it promises. When we talk about a brand, what a brand is, it's helpful to think of a brand in human terms. How we as people relate to others. All of us have our own personality, our ways of dressing and communicating. We have our own values, friends, characteristics, a story to tell. And it's this that makes up who we are. And it's also those characteristics that define a brand. So sorry if I'm teaching some of you to suck eggs, but I think it's a helpful leveler here. Brand is not a logo. It's what people say about you. It's how your business is perceived. It's what customers expect. It's what people trust. It's what differentiates you. It's truth. How that relates to a business then is that the brand is the soul. It's the persona and the spirit of the organization. We engage with other people that we connect with, people we see a bit of ourselves in. We're connected by values, by principles, by beliefs, and therefore people buy from brands that they can believe in and trust, brands that they can build a meaningful connection with. Importantly, it's not just customers. Employees also need to feel that sense of connection, to build a relationship with it and feel like they belong. There's an inescapable truth, whether you actively manage your brand or not, it already exists. Your customers have a perception, your employees have one, your partners and funders definitely do. So the real choice isn't whether you have a brand, it's whether that perception is being shaped by you deliberately or accidentally. And accidental brand strategy is rarely a reliable strategy for growth. Having said that, most businesses do have a brand strategy. It's probably just not written down. And it's sort of being run by the last person to speak to a customer, certainly on a small scale. So there's kind of one question sitting underneath everything that we're going to talk about today. And that's, how does the way your business is perceived affect revenue, margin, growth, and confidence? Most leaders feel the impact of brand before they ever label it as brand, but they experience it as pricing pressure, slower sales, harder sales conversations, or missed opportunities even. Those are the triggers for you to think, okay, is there something that's not quite right here, and how do I need to go about addressing that, or thinking about that commercially for the business. First, let's dig into the cost of a weak or unmanaged brand. So where might we feel the impact? One of the reasons brand is so often underestimated is that a weak brand rarely fails loudly. It fails quietly. Costs creep up, or trust is eroding. Like I mentioned before, you're getting impressions, some little triggers that are making you feel like something's not quite right. Because those effects are gradual, they're easy to explain away until they compound over time, and it takes a little. You've dug a little bit of a hole. It's quite hard to get out in the end, and the loss of trust and confidence happens quickly. It's when people trust you, decisions are quicker. When they don't, everything slows down. Inconsistent brand signals, mixed messaging, unclear positioning, they introduce hesitation, and hesitation is expensive. Customers also don't always choose the best product or option. They choose the option that they know, that feels clearest, safest, easiest to justify. Very often competitors win, not because they're better, but because they're easier to understand and easier to connect with. Reputation now travels really fast, particularly in digital media. Think about reviews, word of mouth, and then all of the digital channels that can accelerate negative or just incorrect impressions. Those small inconsistencies scale really, really quickly. And once trust slips, recovery takes a really long time. So that's why brand needs stewardship and not just sort of creative thinking or input. When the foundations of a brand are weak, marketing has to work much harder to compensate. You end up spending more to explain who you are, what you're about, and why you should be chosen. It takes more to convince, more to reassure. Strong brands reduce that burden. They make every pound that you spend work harder. If you hear feedback, something like we're just a bit more expensive than others, that's usually not a pricing problem. That's often a clarity problem. Clarity on the value you're delivering. Weak brands compete on price or they discount. Strong brands defend and compete on value. So price resistance is rarely about price alone. It's about confidence in what's being bought. And brand doesn't just affect customers. It influences who wants to work with you, who wants to partner with you, and who's willing to back your growth. In that sense, brand quietly shapes the opportunities that even come your way. It can make a weak brand can make collaboration harder, and it can mean that your opportunities for growth can be missed or maybe not even seen at all. And this is the crux of it, the harsh reality. The brand problems rarely announce themselves as brand problems. So just to summarize those, by the time that brand is addressed, the value may already be lost. So with the picture painted of the reality of the environment surrounding your brand, we'll take a look at why brand matters to businesses. Brand is one of the few commercial assets that, when they're managed well, makes future growth easier, more predictable, and potentially cheaper. This isn't just anecdotal. Large-scale effectiveness studies show that long-term brand-led investment explains the majority of positive impacts on business performance outcomes that encompasses revenue, market share, and we'll talk some more about some of those elements as well. Brand is a commercial asset. It's not just decoration. It's a strategic tool that supports long-term commercial success. A really coherent, strong brand supports pricing confidence, embeds trust and credibility, creates differentiation in crowded markets. So let's just unpack some of those things. Trust is built visually and experientially long before sales conversations begin. The experience of your brand is something to really get your head around, because there are so many touch points now with your brand, or where someone can experience your brand, whether they be a potential partner, employee, collaborator, or customer. Sales, when brand foundations are strong, marketing has more substance and will connect much more strongly when it's founded on a marriage of truths or those values. So it has a more positive impact on the business. How customers experience your brand really matters. The strong connections that I talk about, they drive loyalty, in turn creating stability, especially during economic uncertainty, which is really timely, where in the present economic situation, whether you are selling directly B2B or B2C, no matter what you're selling, product, service, whatever, the cost and value conversation is much more poignant. And brand perception influences who wants to work with and invest in your business. The brand experience is not just for customers. A strong brand attracts better talent. You spend less time sifting through loads of CVs from people that you feel like, how have they even applied for this job? Because the clarity of who you are, what you're about, and how you work is conducive to the right people being attracted to your brand. In the same way, those people already in the business feel more aligned. They feel much more closer to where the business is going, and they feel part of that mission. Strong brands compete on value, not discounts. So good design and branding elevate the perception of quality. Customers associate strong branding with higher value or greater professionalism. So premium pricing becomes easier to justify. The conversation is less about price, it's more about value, and long-term relationship rather than supply, just simply supply. A well-established brand acts as a platform for expansion. That clarity and the strength in the brand supports growth. It's easier to get into new markets, smoother product and service launches, and less confusion for customers. So what is brand actually for businesses? Let's break it down into slightly easier to digest chunks. So brand is the sum of how a business thinks, how it behaves, how it shows up consistently over time. It's not a single activity. It's an organizing principle. It's the sum of these parts. It's everything that makes up your foundation as a business. Importantly, brand exists outside the organization. It exists in the minds of others. You don't control it directly, you influence it. It answers the questions: who are you? What do you stand for? Are you credible? Should I choose you to provide me with that service or buy that product from? And in that essence, it's shorthand for decision making, which is exactly why leadership alignment matters so much. Values only matter when they're visual, when they're visible. Strong brands are built on that clarity of purpose that drives strategic direction, values shaping the culture and guiding the decisions that you make, and consistency building belief and trust over time. People make judgments very quickly. Coherence signals care signals competence. Poor execution doesn't just look bad, it introduces doubt. When they see those signals in good design, pleasant experience in person or over the phone or wherever the touch point is, they have the ability to buy in much more readily to who you are and what you do, and come back to that. Brand also defines where you sit in the market. If you don't define that position clearly, your customers will, and they often get it wrong. Positioning is a strategic choice then, not a marketing afterthought. Your brand defines whether you are premium or value, specialist or generalist. Either end of that spectrum you may well sit, but it needs to be deliberate. Thinking about competitive advantage and the importance of a brand, 78% of brands could disappear tomorrow and people wouldn't care. Weak brands are easier to replace, customers switch more readily, competitive pressure intensifies, and this is based on a study of meaningful brands. So not just anecdotal, but data to prove how tough it is for brands and how important it is to have a strong brand. Those strong brands attract the right people through the language and tone. They signal suitability. Poor fit customers and staff are filtered out, and focus improves efficiency. Thinking slightly about how it can go wrong, when your brand reflects how a business behaves, culture leaks. So we want to try and tighten that up and prevent and ensure that what's inside is right, and that anything that does leak out is positive and great, and it's building the brand. Because how teams behave internally eventually becomes visible externally. And consistency builds confidence. Constant reinvention of a brand can create uncertainty, and in such a fast-moving world of products, services, and technology, customers seek stability from the brands that they experience and that they trust. They want that stability in their life from someone and somewhere. So there's an opportunity for brands to present that stability within a world that is changing really, really quickly. So we've already hinted a little bit at where the opportunities are here and where the positives are. So let's dive into that a little bit more deeply, into focusing on the commercial upsides of a strong brand. A study of brand campaigns conducted by a research agency called System 1 and Effie, who are the organization promoting a focus on tangible real-world results in marketing, found that brands with greater brand effects, which are awareness, image, and distinctiveness, had a 43% higher impact on business results over time. And those business results encompass incremental revenue, incremental profit, market share growth, new customer penetration, customer loyalty or retention, and reduced price sensitivity. So it's pretty holistic, and backed up by this study and data. So strong brands are strategic assets. What does all of this actually enable? A strong brand doesn't guarantee success, but it can remove friction from growth and make things easier, because it can increase visibility, build trust, differentiate effectively, support pricing and value, and strengthen loyalty. And then those benefits compound over time, as demonstrated by the data. Familiarity reduces risk. People don't always buy the best product, they buy the product they know. Familiar brands are recalled faster. Recognition reduces decision friction. They're easier to, recognized brands are easier to choose, particularly in crowded markets. And therefore it can become a competitive advantage. Trust shortens sales cycles. Strong brands reduce a perceived risk or likelihood to perceive a risk. Customers feel more confident in choosing you. Sales conversations become easier, and it's more readily suited to forming long-term relationships. A differentiation makes comparison harder because a strong brand stands apart. That's made up of really clear positioning, a distinctive identity, and a memorable presence. So, being distinctive makes you more memorable to your audiences, including talent, investors, and partners, not just customers. And it can reduce the reliance on price when it comes to competition. To touch on marketing efficiency, a strong brand amplifies your spend. With strong foundations, marketing doesn't have to compensate for weaknesses in a foundation. Messaging is clearer, the returns improve. Strong brands make marketing spend work harder. And emotion builds resilience. So I've mentioned building connections and building meaningful connections, being memorable. That's where we generate an emotional connection. Brand plays a really big role in that, and it's what keeps customers coming back. Your product or service is really unlikely to be for everyone, and brand influences who engages with you. It attracts higher quality talent, builds investor confidence, and signals to those people long-term potential. That's really what they're looking for. They want you to be around. Same with customers, really. They want you to be around for the long term. They want to continue to come back and buy your product over time or your service. And that strength in your brand supports the growth ambitions holistically amongst investors and your staff. Price is a proxy for confidence because strong brands justify premium pricing. Branded can be seen as can be looked at as a pricing lever. Strong brands justify value more easily and protect their margin as a result. Clear brands travel better. So if your ambitions are if expansion is part of your growth ambition, developing new products or even entering new markets, diversifying from where you are now, clear brands scale more easily. There's less confusion. That new market is more ready to develop trust more quickly, That strong brand provides a platform for your growth. When we talked about compounding, that the cost efficiency over time is a result of that compounding and consistency. We talk about brand consistency specifically, having to do things again or redo them, whether that's in marketing or whether that's internally or re-recruiting. All of that takes time and it costs money. A strong brand and a strong brand system and a strong brand experience reduces waste. So improving your customer experience, your staff experience, and over time reduces the cost of that to the business. Here's a little snapshot of why having a holistic brand strategy is vital, because where both brand image and trust influence loyalty and price effects, and trust can help retain existing customers and increases their willingness to pay. There is a trade-off. Here, this chart from the same study that I mentioned a second ago demonstrates an 86% lift in those business results. Remember, incremental revenue, profit, market share, but a 12% drop in new customer retention. So a focus only on one or two areas can actually potentially work against others. So a holistic strategy is really, really important. So why might we not value brand in the same way as other elements of the business? There is there may be a leadership gap. Many leaders were never taught to think about brand strategically. It's not a failure, it's just a gap. But it's a gap that can have real commercial consequences. That lack of understanding, perhaps a short-term focused strategy, brand viewed as an expense and not an investment, or that brand is driven or managed reactively. All of those things hinder long-term performance. It's harder for small businesses. Short-term pressure is real, but competition doesn't pause while you focus on urgent priorities. In fact, clarity becomes more important when resources are tight. You spend less time having to educate or train or get people on the right path when that path is already set and it's much clearer. Brand strategy isn't something that you do once you're big. It's usually the reason some businesses get big, and then others just stay busy. It can often be a cost-cutting mistake. Marketing is easy to put a hold on when things are tight, and brand can be often cut as a similar result. But that's because it's misunderstood. There are opportunities in times of pressure to further differentiate and capitalize on the opportunities that are presented within the market when it is constrained, and using those constraints as a springboard. You may be the only person doing that in your market. Short-term focus and short-term savings will most likely lead to a longer-term negative impact. Inconsistency is definitely one of the worst things, and probably the most apparent, visible element of a brand or a brand experience. Because without ownership, inconsistency creeps in. Without ownership or even understanding or given the right prominence within the business, consistency isn't creative's enemy. It's leadership's responsibility. When the brand isn't strong or clearly defined, it leads to multiple interpretations of that. and that's what makes it inconsistent. Your messaging becomes fragmented, so does the experience that customers have of you, and therefore it dilutes your impact. And the impact on all of those things we've talked about, value, perception, and leading to prices, conversation about pricing, or lack of competition. So consistency and brand governance aren't really optional, they're really important to uphold. So we've talked about how that's a leadership responsibility. So let's focus a little bit on brand as a leadership responsibility, because this is the shift. Brand is not marketing's job alone. Leadership sets direction for behavior, for standards, and then brand follows. Leaders have responsibility to shape the culture, to guide that behavior and influence the outcomes. It's not just a marketing function. It's far more foundational and fundamental than that. So questions that leaders should be asking: does our brand stand out? Does it reflect our purpose? Does it support our growth ambitions or plans? Is it relevant today? Does it inspire trust? There are more questions that should be asked, but those strategic questions are, if they're not being asked, then brand is being left to chance. So we've whistled through that super quickly. I've got a little bit more to cover, and some practical things that we can look at as well to really help you get a good grasp of this. But what's really important is that brand isn't optional. Your brand already exists. The only real question is whether it's being stewarded deliberately or left to drift. You're already paying for it. Is it working for your business or against it? So if that has set the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit, let's kind of just try and bring them all back in and ground things in ways that you can get started. So where do you even start? If you've never set about defining your brand or even thinking about brand, where do you get started? Well, this is a really, really helpful quote, and probably from an unexpected source. It's really important to define the truth about who you are. Find out who you are and do it on purpose. The truth can be uncomfortable, but it is unquestionable, and as the saying goes, will set you free. So writing down what you're aiming for, why and how, will give you clarity. That clarity, the clarity that a brutally honest view of yourself brings, is very often a trigger for strategic direction. You might need some help to do that. If there's no one alongside you or within the business that you can bounce that off, or you feel that can ask the right questions, then that's where external help can be really valuable. What we're talking about here is a brand narrative. That's the story you tell people when they ask you what you do and why you do it. So thinking about that story, you need to be able to tell it with conviction. There are three core elements of a brand narrative that play distinct roles, but they collectively form a cohesive story. So think about the red thread through all of these things. Your vision, what outcome you're trying to achieve, your purpose, why you have that goal, and your mission, how you will accomplish this goal. Take your time, iterate it. Definitely don't rush it. And there's no right or wrong here. You will feel it when it's right, because it will feel like it's you, and it's true to yourself, and then play it out to the others around you in the business to make sure it feels right to everyone. Defining your values lots of businesses start here, but I think if there's one piece of advice I can give is to consider focusing purely on the definition of values being principles or standards of behavior. Lots of times I see brands that have written out words or descriptions of their values that don't really reflect a principle or a standard of behavior. So they've not quite got there. They haven't sat back and thought, how does that relate to us in practice? What does that mean? Because when you focus purely on that definition, they become much, much clearer. There won't actually be that many words that accurately describe how you behave, the standards you uphold, and the principles that guide you in your decisions in business. There just simply isn't a very long list of those types of words. So you'll end up with a long list of words, which is really, really helpful. Perhaps put them on Post-it notes, do that on a digital whiteboard if you're not a tactile person, and then group them, because there will be similarities, there'll be overlaps, and they will sit within groups. So what you'll probably end up with in that exercise is a short list of maybe 3 to 5 groups around which you can identify or pull out the strongest one, the one that feels the most tight or closest to what it is, and then describe how you live by or demonstrate that in practical terms. When you can arrive at that point, it will align the foundations of the business from a people perspective, and that connects customers, staff, suppliers, prospects, and recruits. Then embed them. That understanding and belief in what you're aiming for, why, and how you're going to get there has to be at the heart of everything. There's quite a few times the uncomfortable truth that I mentioned can often result in businesses that maybe have a few staff members already, or even bigger businesses, particularly when it's bigger businesses, there will be a lack of marriage on a values level with some people in the business, because if it's only a recent encapsulation of your principles, what you stand for and how you behave, you may well over time have recruited people who seem to be suitable and have performed quite well in their roles, but you're now you're sort of realizing when you're focusing on it being principles and behavior and standards of behavior, that some people might not be behaving in the way that you might expect them to based on that definition. It's a slightly uncomfortable truth. There's not necessarily an easy way out of that or a silver bullet, but at least you've got the clarity and you know where you need to get to. It's really important that everyone involved in conducting your business reflects your values, because if you're not all on the same track, you'll end up in the wrong place eventually. And so some practicalities of brand management. There are various things that you can do, and fairly able to do them yourselves, depending on your backgrounds and your knowledge. There's lots of guidance you can find online for free. You may not be able to shape it quite as well as you might want to, and this is again where some external help will come in, but having a framework of elements that you are conducting, such as a brand audit, an analysis of how you're perceived by customers in the market, some benchmarking against competitors, which you need to be able to use your vision, your purpose, and your mission, and your values against, to align where you sit within the market, can be really, really helpful and eye-opening, and something you should do fairly regularly. And thinking about what mechanisms can you put in place to keep everything and everyone on the same track, from the practicalities of how your business works. But crucially, elevating brand strategy and brand experience within the business will help you overcome lots of the barriers that we've talked about today. And so finally, before we get into questions, I thought it'd be helpful to, I mean, there are so many books I could recommend you reading, but there's probably two that are quite different, but really, really helpful. One is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And in fact, you can look up his TED Talk. This was quite a few years ago now, and you probably have all heard of it. If you haven't, definitely pick it up. As you can tell, it's not a massive book. But start with that one because it starts with why. That's going to help. That's going to help really embed some foundations of what's at the heart of you and what makes up a brand. And then, even though I don't like the title and I'm not a subscriber to that type of thing, I managed to get over that. And once I got into this book, No Bullshit Strategy, it's actually brilliantly delivered. And that is much more business focused. But with your precursor to that being Start With Why, there's a lot of carryover, and then there is a lot of practical advice in that book that you'll be able to take forward, and some really great examples from Alex as well. There we go. Keris, that was quite a quick blast through, wasn't it?
Wow, there was a lot to take in there. I think the kind of key message though came across really strongly is that, you know, your brand is there whether you like it or not. So take it seriously and start addressing it. Obviously, as somebody who's in kind of communications myself, and not, you know, I work in the public sector. We work for the Growth Hub is a Cornwall Council project. So we don't have that kind of drive towards profitability, but we do have a drive towards public service. But I think that there's very much a case for branding and communications being seen as the nice to have rather than the essential, which is always quite frustrating in terms of, you know, actually everything that we do could probably be improved by better comms. You know, service reductions can be improved by explaining why we do things, why we want the public to help us to reduce costs and things like that. So, you know, but branding and communications is seen as being making things pretty and the kind of a nice to have, which is very frustrating for somebody who works in communications. I presume that's your kind of experience of working with businesses.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that's not and that is natural. There's nothing wrong with that, because when you're running a business, you're focused on running the business, and there's a lot of pressure on you. There's so many things you've got to try and stay on top of, and it's all consuming. So to be able to take yourself away from that and have a little bit of a look back down on the business rather than in it is extremely difficult.
Absolutely.
And that's where help from external parties can be really valuable, because it's very hard for you to take yourself out of it. And then quite rightly, you should be focused on what you're doing.
So we've got a couple of questions in the chat, and then I've had a couple of questions sent to me in advance of people that wouldn't be able to attend in person. So we can get to those, but we'll do the ones that are live first. So somebody said, as a small business with a very flat management structure, so all the managers wear many hats, how can we ensure that leadership consistency and the brand is operationalized throughout the business? So I suppose that's it. You know, if one person, is it best for one person to take the lead on this, or for everyone to buy in? What's your view on that?
It's probably a bit of both, because without ownership, it won't go. Things won't happen. So ownership is really important, but it can't only exist and be described and defined by one person. That's great that there's a flat structure. We're all equals, and that's a brilliant way to look at it. Everybody has a valuable perspective and input. What I would suggest is assign an owner and have regular sessions make that owner set up those regular sessions, do the work together if you haven't already, to define really clearly what your brand is, what your brand narrative is, the foundation of your brand. But make sure that that input comes from a wide base, so that it's not just one person writing it down on a piece of paper with just their own view of it. That, because you have to think about customers. Like we said, it's not your brand. It probably in your position isn't necessarily only what you say it is. It's a lot of that is going to come from the market. So you're probably going to have to do a bit of an exercise in working out what can we see from the market, what sound bites do we get from customers or partners or suppliers in the market about who we are and what we do and how we do it, and our position in the market, and then compare that to the way that you guys think about it yourselves. There will either be a really happy marriage on every level, and then that's amazing, and then you just capitalize on that, crystallize it, and it's there and you can track that, or there will be obvious gaps and differences, and then you just explore and go into those gaps and try and uncover the root cause of any problems, put in place the solutions, and the list of the jobs to be done should be clear from there. Hopefully that answers the question.
Definitely. So another person's asking, branding is becoming more part of my role. So I don't have any marketing or branding qualifications. How do you recommend that I develop my knowledge and skills to be able to grow into this role?
That's a great question, and that's really exciting. Can be a bit scary, but what I'd try and make sure is that you're afforded the investment, and whether that's time, a little bit of budget, whatever's available to you. It's not just something that's given to you to do on top of your day job, unless you are really committed to doing that, and then that's fine. You do it on the side, but make sure you're carving out that time to do it justice, and then start from the basics. Don't run straight to execution. So there's a really important distinction between strategy and execution. A strategy tells you what you should do, and execution is all of the things that you could do. There's a really helpful clarity when you define both of those things. Brand strategy is foundational, and without it, you'll end up just firing things off and creating things and doing things that some of them might land, some of them might stick, some of them might work, but that might be a little bit more by luck than deliberately. So start basic, start looking at brand strategy, how to craft one, take some of the pointers that I've given on those slides to really define that and work out what that means for then how you translate that into marketing. Appreciate this session hasn't really covered that. We don't really there isn't the scope for us in this session to talk about bridging the gap between brand strategy and how that's executed in marketing, advertising, and everything else. But that all can be done, and arguably will be easier once you have that really clear, compelling foundation for the brand.
So this person sounds like they're a staff member rather than a leader in the organization. So I probably say, send them this video, send them the link when you get the video, and say, this branding and your direction of your marketing is really, really important commercially, and to take that seriously. So, if you're new in the role, like Ben said, give you the time and space to be really able to give this the time and attention it deserves, rather than it just being an add-on. I'd say that's
absolutely right. You're going to need the input from leadership. From
the senior, yes.
You're without that, you will struggle. It will be really hard. And they might be really willing and if really forthcoming, and let's hope they are. So I would definitely, if they watch the video, that's great. You've got the deck. Take out some of those key questions that we ask of leadership in that deck and put it to them. And hopefully you'll just get back some really constructive, positive feedback.
Okay, so no more questions live. So we're just going to go to the kind of ones that sent in advance. So somebody's a really small business, and so is the brand strategy relevant, or is it just more of a big company thing? We can all think about, you know, a really strong brands that we know on the high street, but is that really relevant if it's, you know, if it's your sort of local high street shop or a local small brand that's based in Cornwall?
Yep. I think it definitely is. I think I covered it earlier on in the deck, but it's not, so brand strategy isn't something that just bigger companies do. If you arrive at it later at that time, you may well already be off track. We talked about being on the right track, ending up in the right place. Your brand strategy needs to be foundational, so it needs to be done as early as possible.
So a couple of questions on the same theme, really. So how can I tell if my brand is strong or weak, or whether or not I just need better marketing? And on the same sort of theme, is there any early warning signs that my brand just isn't working and it's not doing what it should, and I need to refresh something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Quite a big one. I'll unpack a few bits in that. So the signals you might be seeing could be things like sales cycle taking longer, or sales conversations being more difficult, or that's more on the B2B side. If it's B2C, a drop in sales or churn from customers. There may well be some individual data points that you can gather on your business performance that, looked at in isolation, could be easy to just shrug off. But if you think about the compounding effect of those, take a look back through the section in this document as well, where I reference those things, and look at the effect of those things compounding. They are likely to trigger your need to firm up the foundation of the brand. From a marketing perspective, better marketing is enabled by a stronger brand with a clearer proposition that's founded in truth and able to build a connection between the brand and its customers. So if your marketing isn't performing very well, or if you're kind of looking at what's going out there and your gut feeling is that there's just something not quite right about it, it doesn't really feel like it's you, that's also a really good gauge. If it doesn't feel right to you, it's probably not. Because if you are the founder, or you're the person that this represents, you're thinking about it in human terms again, if it's not connecting with you, that's definitely not right. It's not putting you out there in the right way. That's only two elements of quite a big question, Keris. Was that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's I suppose there is a sort of ongoing. A brand isn't something you kind of put on the shelf and go, right, that's our brand. I suppose it's got, because there's a couple of questions around keeping up with kind of market changes and maybe customer values changing. So I suppose that's just about maybe if your brand isn't working anymore, it's got to be a constant process of making sure that you check in and reevaluate and making sure that you're kind of everything is still aligned, because the way people, the way values are changing, your customers are changing, technology is changing, and you have to adapt and go with it. I suppose that's what we're saying.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Think about it as at least a check-in every 6 months on if you've created a bit of a framework at the start, a brand audit, a look at competitors, an analysis of the sentiment or the perception amongst your customers that's in the market. All of those kind of data points that you can gather, anecdotally or not. It doesn't have to be hard data. It's very hard to get that when you're a small business. Totally understand that, but I think you'll understand whether there's enough in there or not, or whether you need to ask more questions or look for more information. And don't make it unwieldy. Do as much as you can to feel confident in what you're looking at and what you're assessing yourself based on. Then come back to it, like you just said, Kerith. Don't do that once and then set it off and be like, there it is. Like the worst. I mean, and it happens in big organisations. The brand guidelines get created and then they get filed, and that's kind of it. I'm not suggesting you need to wear T-shirts with slogans on or have that sort of stuff in your office or anything like that. But I mean, we laugh about that, but that can be, if it's done right, or if that feels right for you, then that's the right thing to do. If that's what people are going to remember. But if it becomes wallpaper, again, it's a bit like poor marketing or advertising. That's just wallpaper. If it's not interesting, if it's not relevant now, no one's going to take notice and they're not going to remember it. Take that external view and look inwards and think about how your brand is projecting internally and externally.
It's really helpful to think of these things as long-term, kind of your kind of core values as an organization as well, isn't it? So political winds might change, things might be up and down, but if you have your core idea of why you're in business and why you're delivering and what you want to deliver as a business, then that kind of keeps you grounded, and that should help you sell your core organization. Like you said, it's not just to customers, it's also to your staff, and finance funders, and stakeholders as well.
That's it.
We've got another live question. So this particular business has got a kind of flagship product, and they obviously want to kind of expand and grow, extend their product line. How do they allow space for brand extension if they're so if you're so identified with one particular product? I think this is probably the last question. Unless any more come live in the chat.
Yeah, can you just read that one again, Kerith?
Yeah, so this particular questionnaire, they obviously work for a business where they've got one flagship product that they're known for. So how do they allow space for brand extension?
Okay, so if maybe it feels like your product is your brand, is sort of the impression I'm getting. Let's distinguish the two things, and maybe if that is necessary, that's perhaps something that you need to do. Think about what your vision was originally. Try and divorce that from the product or the manifestation of that if you can, because that should just be a raw purpose, a raw objective that you set out for. And in those three elements of the brand narrative that I highlighted a minute ago, think about the connection between that purpose, what you set out to achieve, why you have that objective, or you did have that objective in the first place. Because I think that the house is probably, your mission is probably, and the how in that was probably to create that product and bring it to market, and you've now become known for that. But if you cycle back then to where you started, that's your springboard for how you then diversify and go beyond that. Hopefully that has the breadth or the legs to take it further. There'll be many things that come into that. And I'd be happy to pick up conversation separately with just to see if there's some advice that I can give. But you've got a brilliant opportunity there, because if you are well known for something, you are well known. That's fantastic. And unless the other thing you want to do is completely different, based on a completely different set of values, almost like another brand, that is also an option. Your personal brand is only ever going to be one thing, but that can be brought to life in business across multiple brands. If you think about the brands that some of the biggest FMCG brands, Unilever, for example, how many brands they have within their stable. Lots of people don't connect them. They don't. Magnum is part of Unilever. or there are so many that have a big brand portfolio that is something that's definitely a viable option. So yeah, big topic, but that's really exciting, and I'd be really happy to have a chat with them if it's valuable.
I was just going to say, have you got a final screen with your contact details, or have you missed out this promotion? Have you do what all good branding people do and forgot to brand up and forgot to promote ourselves?
Yeah, I have, haven't I? Yeah, totally missed that out.
So yeah, so I don't know if we can.
No, I haven't got any. Sorry, I'll leave you with my
terrible.
my final thought. There you go. That's where we ended. Sorry, I did totally lose that.
I'm happy to email everybody out with the details if you wanted to get in touch directly. I probably should say, other options, other companies are available apart from Ben. So you can, but I'm sure you can find him on LinkedIn, reach out, and I'm happy to share those details if anyone wants to ping me an email, and I can put you in touch. So thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you to everyone who's watched the recording as well. Thank you for sticking with us till the end. Have you got any final thoughts or anything you wanted to say?
No, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this has been a little bit enlightening at the very least. And like Kerry says, clearly the Growth Hub is there to help you to pursue some of these things. And if there's something that I can help with that's within my sphere, then let's connect up. I'd look forward to a message from you on LinkedIn.
Thanks very much. All right, cheers, bye.
Bye.